The needle was already under my fingernail when I realized the man I'd been serving tea to for 99 days was the one holding the pliers. Kenji's hand didn't shake. Mine did. Blood welled up where metal met flesh, each drop hitting the white tatami mat with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. My breath came in short gasps through clenched teeth. The tea room smelled like jasmine incense and copper. Behind him, through the translucent shoji screen, I could see the shadows of the other girls still serving in the main room, still smiling, still pretending they couldn't hear the wet sound of my breathing. "You were perfect," he said in Japanese, his voice carrying that same gentle tone he'd used every evening for the past 3 months. 99 days. I almost believed you myself. The pliers twisted. White light exploded behind my eyes. I bit down on my lip hard enough to taste blood because screaming would give him satisfaction and I'd already given him everything else. This is how it ends, I thought. 3 months of work. 12 girls who needed saving. A trafficking network that stretched from Manila to Macau. All of it burning down because I'd made one mistake. Because I'd tucked the wire recorder half an inch too far to the left when I dressed that morning, and the edge had caught the light wrong when I'd bent to pour his tea. Or maybe that wasn't the mistake at all. Maybe the mistake was day 47, when he'd asked me what I thought about while falling asleep, and I'd answered truthfully instead of staying in character. Maybe it was day 63, when he'd shown me a photo of cherry blossoms at Kidorigafuchi and my smile had been real instead of practiced. Maybe it was day 81, when he'd touched my hand across the tea table and I'd let myself feel it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning. To the moment I stopped being Emily Chin, FBI Special Agent, and became Hana Nakamura, the girl who poured tea for monsters. 3 months earlier, I'd been sitting in a briefing room in Quantico, Virginia, watching surveillance footage that made my stomach turn. The video was grainy, shot from a distance with a telephoto lens. Women, girls, really, some of them couldn't have been older than 15, being loaded into a shipping container at Yokohama port. They moved like sleepwalkers. Drugged probably. Or so broken they didn't bother fighting anymore. My handler, director James Morrison, had frozen the frame on one face. A girl with dark hair and eyes that looked straight through the camera without seeing it. Eyes that had already given up. Her name was Maya Santos, Morrison said, his voice flat in that way that meant he was working very hard not to feel anything. Japanese Coast Guard found her body floating in Sagami Bay 3 weeks ago. 14 years old. Cause of death was drowning, but the coroner's report showed evidence of prolonged sexual assault, malnutrition, and torture. My hands had gripped the edge of the conference table. The wood grain bit into my palms. I needed the pain to stay focused, to not think about the fact that Maya Santos had been 14. The same age I'd been when my mother died. "I'll do it," I'd said. Morrison had looked at me with those tired eyes that had seen too much. "You don't even know what you're volunteering for yet." "Doesn't matter. I'll do it. Emily." I speak fluent Japanese and Mandarin. I can pass for local. My mother was Taiwanese, so I've got the right bone structure, the right coloring. And I know how to be invisible. I'd met his gaze. I know how to disappear. That last part wasn't in my personnel file. How my mother, Lin Chin, had been trafficked from Taipei to San Francisco when she was 16. How she'd spent 3 years in a massage parlor in Chinatown before a raid had freed her. How she built a life after that. Learned English, got her GED, worked 2 jobs to put me through school. How she died of a brain aneurysm when I was 12, leaving me with her languages, her cheekbones, and her unfinished war against the men who traded in human beings. Morrison had studied me for a long moment. Then he pulled out a file folder, slid it across the table. The Yamaguchi-gumi is one of the largest yakuza syndicates in Japan. They're into everything: drugs, gambling, construction, politics. But their most profitable operation is human trafficking. Young women, mostly from Southeast Asia. They move them through a network of fronts, legitimate businesses that launder both money and people. And you want me to infiltrate one of these fronts? A tea house in Shibuya. Traditional establishment called Sakura House. High-end clientele. Politicians, businessmen, yakuza leadership. They hire young women as servers, mostly Chinese and Korean immigrants with expired visas, no family connections, no one who'll report them missing. He'd open the folder, revealing photographs. Girls in kimonos, faces carefully blank. Standard rotation is 90 days. After that, the girls either get moved to other locations or they disappear entirely. So I go in as a server. Gather intelligence. Get extracted on day 90. Day 89 actually. We pull you out a day early before they have a chance to decide what to do with you. Morrison had pulled out another photo. This one showed a woman in her 50s, hard-faced, standing in the doorway of what looked like a traditional Japanese building. This is Yuki Tanaka. She runs Sakura House. Former comfort woman during her youth, worked her way up to Mama-san. She's smart, ruthless, and she can spot a fake from 100 yards. You'll need to be perfect. I can be perfect. I know. That's why I'm sending you. He'd closed the folder. But Emily, understand what you're walking into. These aren't street-level criminals. The men who come to Sakura House are the elite of the criminal underworld. They've killed people for less than looking at them wrong. And if they discover you're FBI... He trailed off, but I didn't need him to finish. I'd seen the photos of Maya Santos. I knew what these men did to women. How do I get in? We've created a legend for you. Complete backstory, documentation, everything you'll need. He'd pulled out another file. Meet Hana Nakamura. I'd opened it. Stared at a photograph of someone who looked like me but wasn't. Or maybe was in some parallel universe where my mother had never escaped. Hana Nakamura. 23 years old. Born in Osaka to a Japanese father and Chinese mother. Father was a small-time yakuza who'd racked up gambling debts before dying in a motorcycle accident 2 years ago. Debts inherited by his only daughter. Working at Sakura House to pay them off. Was perfect. Tragic enough to be believable, common enough not to attract extra attention. A girl with no options and nowhere to go. Exactly the kind of person who ended up serving tea to criminals. Memorize everything in that file, Morrison had said. Become her. Hana Nakamura exists as of now. Emily Chin goes on sabbatical. Deep cover means deep, no contact with family, friends, anyone from your old life. You'll have a handler in Tokyo, but communication will be minimal and carefully controlled. For 90 days you are Hana. Nothing else. I'd nodded, already reading through the file. Already becoming someone else. The transformation had taken 2 weeks. They'd flown in a cultural consultant, a Japanese-American woman named Keiko who'd spent 3 years working in traditional tea houses before joining the bureau. She taught me everything. The precise angle of a bow, 30 degrees for equals, 45 for customers, 90 for the mama-san or high-ranking yakuza. How to kneel and size a position for hours without my legs going numb. How to pour tea so the steam rose at exactly the right angle. How to arrange my face into a mask of pleasant neutrality that revealed nothing, felt nothing, wanted nothing. The most important thing, Keiko had told me on day 5 of training, is understanding that you are not a person to these men. You are atmosphere. Background music. You exist to make them comfortable, to create an environment where they can conduct business or relax. The moment you become a person, the moment they see you as having thoughts or feelings or desires, you've failed. So I'm furniture. Exactly. Beautiful, well-maintained furniture that pours excellent tea. She demonstrated the proper way to hold a Kyusu teapot. But here's the thing about being furniture. People talk around you. They forget you have ears. That's your advantage. She'd also taught me how to hide the recording device. A miracle of modern technology, smaller than a grain of rice, sewn into the elaborate folds of the obi sash that held my kimono closed. Activated by body heat, good for 8 hours of recording. Transmitted to a secure server via encrypted cellular signal. You'll wear this every day, Keiko had said, showing me how to position it correctly. But remember, it's delicate. The fabric has to fold exactly right or the signal gets blocked. And if someone who knows what they're looking for examines your obi closely, they'll find it. Then I won't let anyone examine my obi closely. No, you won't. On my last day of training, Morrison had called me into his office. Last chance to back out, he'd said. No judgment, no consequences. This operation is voluntary. I'm going. Emily, he'd stopped, chosen his words carefully. I've run a lot of undercover ops. The hardest part isn't the danger. It's not even the isolation. It's maintaining your sense of self when you're pretending to be someone else 24 hours a day for months. You start to lose track of where the legend ends and you begin. It can mess with your head in ways you don't expect. I can handle it. I know you can. I'm just saying, don't lose yourself in there. Remember who you really are and why you're doing this. I'd looked at the photo of Maya Santos that he kept pinned to his bulletin board. I won't forget. But standing here now 99 days later, with Kenji's pliers under my fingernail and my cover blown to hell, I wondered if I'd kept that promise. Because somewhere along the way Hana had started to feel more real than Emily. And the man torturing me now had been the one who'd made her feel most alive. Day 1 had been terrifying. I'd walked through the doors of Sakura House wearing a kimono the color of pale pink cherry blossoms, My hair styled in a traditional Shimada updo, my face painted white in the old geisha style. My heart had hammered so hard I'd thought everyone could hear it. Yuki Tanaka had been waiting in the entrance hall. She'd looked me up and down with eyes like a hawk evaluating prey. "You're late," she'd said in Japanese. I'd bowed 90 degrees holding it. "I apologize, Mama-san. It won't happen again. See that it doesn't. Punctuality is respect. Disrespect is not tolerated here." She'd circled me slowly. "Can you serve tea without spilling?" "Yes, Mama-san." "Can you kneel for 4 hours without shifting or complaining?" "Yes, Mama-san." "Can you smile while men say disgusting things to you? Can you bow while they touch you in ways you don't want to be touched? Can you pretend to be grateful for the privilege of serving them?" I'd met her eyes. Yes. She'd nodded once, sharp and businesslike. "The rules are simple. You serve. You smile. You speak only when spoken to. What you hear in these rooms stays in these rooms. What you see stays here. What happens to the girls who forget that rule?" She'd smiled, cold and terrible. "Let's just say the Pacific Ocean is very deep and very forgiving." Then she turned, sliding open a shoji screen to reveal the main serving room. "You'll start tonight. Watch the other girls. Learn. Make no mistakes." That first night, I'd served tea to 12 men in the main room. Politicians in expensive suits. Businessmen with Rolex watches. Men with tattoos visible at their collars and wrists. The marks of yakuza membership. They talked around me like I wasn't there, discussing shipments and territories and debts paid in blood or money or both. I'd poured sake with hands that wanted to shake but didn't. Arranged plates of sashimi and wagyu beef. Knelt beside tables while men's hands accidentally brushed against me. Smiled. Bowed. Disappeared into the background while recording every word they said. If you think the hardest part of being undercover is lying to criminals, hit that like button. Because the hardest part is actually lying to yourself about what you're willing to endure to get the job done. By day 7, I'd identified 6 shell corporations used for money laundering. By day 14, I'd mapped 3 different shipping routes used for human trafficking. By day 21, I had enough evidence to arrest half of the syndicate's middle management. And by day 28, I'd met Kenji Sato. He'd walked into the main room on a Thursday evening in April, and the temperature had dropped 10 degrees. Not literally, but every person in that room had straightened, had become more alert, more careful. I'd seen one of the politicians actually pale. Kenji had been dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, no tie, white shirt open at the collar. Early 30s. Tall for a Japanese man, maybe 6 feet. His hair was styled back from his face, revealing sharp cheekbones and eyes that missed nothing. When he'd moved, I'd caught a glimpse of tattoos at his wrist, the tail of a dragon disappearing up his forearm under the expensive fabric. He'd taken the seat of honor, the one closest to the tokonoma alcove where a scroll painting of Mount Fuji hung beside an arrangement of seasonal flowers. The seat reserved for the highest-ranking person in the room. I'd known immediately, this was someone who mattered. Yuki had appeared at my elbow, her hand gripping my arm hard enough to bruise. "That's Kenji Sato," she'd whispered in Mandarin, which she used when she wanted to make sure the Japanese speakers didn't understand. "He's Wakagashira, second in command of the entire Yamaguchi-gumi. You serve him perfectly. You smile. You do not speak unless he speaks to you first. You do not look directly at him unless he requires it. Understand?" I'd nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. "If you displease him, they'll find you in pieces. If you please him too much, he might decide to keep you, and that's worse. So you be perfect and invisible. Go." I'd approached his table with my heart in my throat, knelt beside him, poured sencha into a cup that probably cost more than my real car back in Virginia. His hand had brushed mine when he'd reached for the tea. Just a touch. Barely contact. But I'd felt it like an electric shock. "You're new," he'd said without looking at me, his voice low and cultured. Educated. Nothing like the rough yakuza voices I'd heard in movies. "Yes, sir." "Chinese." "My mother was Taiwanese." "Ah." He'd taken a sip of tea, still not looking at me. "What's your name?" "Hannah, sir." "Hannah." He'd said it like he was tasting the word, testing it. "Flower. Pretty name for a pretty girl." Finally, he turned his head, met my eyes. "How old are you, Hannah?" 23, sir." "Young." Something had flickered across his face. Not quite sympathy but close. "And you're here paying off your father's debts?" My pulse had spiked. How did he know that? Had someone briefed him? Was this a test? "Yes, sir." "How much does he owe?" 3 million yen, sir. About 25,000 US dollars. Not enough to be suspicious, not small enough to be easily paid off. That's a lot of tea. He'd set down his cup, studied me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Tell me something, Hannah. You have good vocabulary. The way you hold yourself suggests education. The callus on your right index finger is from holding a pen, not from manual labor. So why is an educated young woman serving tea to yakuza instead of working in an office somewhere? My breath had caught. He'd noticed the callus. I'd been so careful, had spent weeks roughening my hands to match my cover story, but I still held pens the way I'd been taught in calligraphy class as a child. And he'd seen it in less than 5 minutes. My father's creditors don't accept payment in office work, I'd said, keeping my voice steady. He'd smiled. Not unkind. Almost impressed? Honest answer. I appreciate honesty, Hannah. It's rare in places like this. He gestured at the tea. I'll be here most evenings for the next few months. Conducting business. I prefer sencha to matcha, water at exactly 70 degrees for brewing, no sugar, and I like silence while I drink. Can you remember that? Yes, Kenji-san. Good. He'd pulled out papers from a leather briefcase, spread them on the table. And Hannah? Whatever brought you here, whatever you're running from, it's safer inside these walls than out there. Remember that. Then he'd gone back to his documents and I'd gone back to being invisible. But something had shifted in my chest. Some fundamental understanding had changed. I'd expected him to be a monster. Instead he'd been human. Observant. Almost kind. That had been the first warning sign. The first crack in my professional distance. By day 40, Kenji and I had developed a routine. He'd arrive at 8, take the same seat, order the same tea. Sometimes he'd work in silence, reviewing papers or making phone calls in low tones. Sometimes he'd have meetings, other yakuza, politicians, businessmen. I'd serve them all, recording everything, my face a pleasant mask. But sometimes, late at night when the other guests had left and Yuki had retired to her quarters, Kenji would gesture for me to sit with him. Not across the table, that would be inappropriate. But nearby, kneeling on a cushion while he drank his tea and talked. He talked about books he'd read. Mishima and Murakami and surprisingly, American authors like Hemingway and Fitzgerald. He talked about places he'd traveled before the Syndicate became his whole life. Paris, London, New York. He taught me the proper way to appreciate cherry blossoms, which he said most people rush through instead of really seeing. You're supposed to sit beneath the trees, he'd said one night in late April, showing me photos on his phone of the cherry trees at Kidoragafuchi. Let the petals fall on you like snow. Understand that beauty is temporary, that these blossoms will be gone in a week, and that's what makes them precious. Mono no aware, the pathos of things. The beauty in impermanence. I'd looked at the photos, pink petals against blue sky, their fragility almost painful, and I'd felt something crack open in my chest. I've never seen them in person, I'd said. The cherry blossoms. Never? My mother died in March. I always associate spring with loss instead of beauty. It had slipped out before I could stop it. Not Hannah's truth, Emily's. My mother had died in March, not Hannah's fictional father. But Kenji hadn't questioned it. He just nodded, like he understood grief that complicated seasonal beauty. Then we'll have to change that association, he'd said quietly. Next spring I'll take you to see them properly. Next spring. Like I'd still be here. Like Hana Nakamura was a person with a future instead of a construct with an expiration date. He'd asked me questions too. Careful ones that skirted around the edges of my cover story without quite touching it. What did I think about when I couldn't sleep? What was my earliest memory? If I could go anywhere in the world, where would it be? Did I believe in second chances? I'd answered with Hannah's truths mostly. But sometimes Emily had slipped through. And he'd notice, I'd see it in his eyes, a flicker of recognition or curiosity, but he'd never push. Just file it away, this growing collection of contradictions that made up whoever I really was. By day 50, I'd realized I was looking forward to his arrivals. That I'd started timing my breaks so I'd be available when he came in. That I'd caught myself checking my reflection before serving him, making sure my hair was perfect, my makeup flawless. By day 60, I'd smiled at something he'd said, a joke about a pompous politician who'd visited earlier, and it had been real. Not the practiced smile of Hannah the server. An actual, genuine expression of amusement. And he'd seen it. His eyes had widened slightly, and then he'd smiled back and something warm and dangerous had passed between us. By day 70, I'd understood that I was falling for him. And that this feeling would destroy everything. The wire in my obi kept recording. His voice. His laughter. The way he said my name, Hannah, like it was something precious. Command would review those recordings and hear actionable intelligence about yakuza operations. I'd review them later, alone in my tiny apartment in Shibuya, and hear something else entirely. The sound of someone seeing me. Really seeing me, even if what he saw was mostly a lie. On day 73, everything had started to unravel. Kenji had arrived later than usual, around 11 at night. Most of the other guests had already left. His knuckles had been split and bleeding, his jaw tight with tension. He'd sat heavily at his usual table, and I'd poured his tea without being asked. Rough night? I'd said, forgetting myself. Too familiar. Too real. He looked at me surprised. Then his expression had softened into something tired and almost grateful. You could say that. Do you want to talk about it? You're not supposed to ask questions, Hannah. I know. I'd knelt beside him, settling into the familiar position, the tea between us. But I'm asking anyway. He'd studied me for a long moment. Then, like a dam breaking, there's a shipment coming in next week. Girls from the Philippines. 12 of them. Youngest is 14. His hand had tightened around the teacup, knuckles going white. I'm supposed to oversee the delivery. Make sure they're processed correctly. My blood had gone cold. This was it. The intelligence Morrison had sent me here to gather. 12 girls. 12 potential Maya Santos. Will you? I'd asked, fighting to keep my voice neutral. What choice do I have? He'd looked at me, and the pain in his eyes had been genuine. Bro. This is what I am, Hannah. This is what we do. My family has been yakuza for 4 generations. My grandfather, my father, now me. You think I chose this? You think I wanted to be the kind of man who trades in human beings? Then don't be. It's not that simple. Isn't it? Just say no. And then what? They kill me. Or worse, they kill my mother, my sister, everyone I've ever cared about. He'd set down the cup with shaking hands. There's no way out, Hannah. Once you're in this life, you're in it until you die. The only choice is how much of your soul you lose along the way. I'd reached out without thinking, touched his bloodied knuckles. There's always a choice. Is there? He'd turned his hand over, caught mine, held it. What choice brought you here, really? Not the story about your father's debts. The real reason. My heart had hammered. Survival. Exactly. We're all just surviving. Doing what we have to do to get through another day. He'd pulled away, stood abruptly. Thank you for the tea, Hannah. And for the illusion that we're anything more than what circumstances made us. He'd left without looking back. I'd sat there for another 20 minutes, my hands still warm from his touch, my mind racing. Then I'd gone to the bathroom, locked the door, and transmitted everything to my handler in Tokyo. The shipment date, next Wednesday, April 17th. The location, Warehouse 7 in Yokohama Port. The number of victims, 12 girls, ages 14 to 19. My handler's response had been immediate. Excellent work. Maintain position. Extraction scheduled for day 89 as planned. Do not deviate from protocol. I'd stared at that message until the screen went dark. 12 girls. 12 lives hanging in the balance. And I was supposed to wait 16 more days while the FBI coordinated a multi-agency raid? I typed back, what if we don't have 16 days? The response, we need time to coordinate with Japanese authorities. International jurisdiction issues. Political complications. You know this Agent Shin. That had stung. Agent Shin. Using my real name in a communication even encrypted. A reminder of who I actually was. What I was actually doing there. I deleted the messages, flushed the evidence, fixed my makeup, and gone back to serving tea like nothing had happened. But something had changed. I'd felt it in my bones, in the way my hands had trembled slightly when I'd poured sake for a table of businessmen discussing construction contracts that were probably covers for money laundering. In the way I'd caught myself watching the clock, counting down to Wednesday, to the moment when 12 girls would arrive at that warehouse. On day 81, Kenji had asked me to have tea with him. Not serve him, sit with him. As equals. This isn't appropriate, I'd said even as I'd knelt across from him instead of beside him. Probably not. But I'm tired of appropriate. He poured tea for me, reversing our roles. I've been thinking about what you said. About choice. Kenji. I want to show you something. He pulled out his phone, opened a photo. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile. This is my niece. Echo. She wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up. She's obsessed with pandas. Every birthday, every Christmas she asks for stuffed pandas. She has 17 of them now. I'd looked at the photo, at this child who was evidence of Kenji's humanity. She's beautiful. She is. And she's the reason I can't just walk away from this life. He put the phone away. My sister married a civilian, a teacher. Good man. They have a good life because I make sure of it. I pay for Aiko's school, for their house, for everything. But more importantly, I protect them. As long as I'm Wakagashira, no one touches my family. If I leave. He trailed off, but I'd understood. They become targets. Exactly. So you see, Hannah, it's not about choice. It's about which terrible option I can live with. What if there was a third option? He'd looked at me sharply. What are you talking about? What if you could get out? All the way out. New identity, new life, protection for your family. What if you could be free? In exchange for what? I'd taken a breath. This was it. The moment where I should have backed off, stayed in character, maintained protocol. Instead, I'd said, information. Names, routes, bank accounts. Everything you know about the trafficking operation. Enough to dismantle it completely. The silence had stretched between us, sharp as a knife. You're not just a server, he'd said finally. I've known for weeks. The way you watch people, like you're cataloging everything. The questions you don't ask but want to. The fact that you're too intelligent, too observant, too perfect at being exactly what you need to be. He leaned forward. So tell me, Hannah, or whatever your real name is, what are you? Police? FBI? Interpol? My cover was blown. I should have denied it. Should have laughed it off. Instead, I'd met his eyes and said, does it matter? It might. Because I need to know if you're going to save those 12 girls. The room had tilted. You know about the shipment. Of course I know. I'm coordinating it. He pulled out a USB drive, set it on the table between us like a grenade. This has everything. The entire trafficking network. Names of every person involved, from the street-level recruiters in Manila to the politicians who look the other way. Bank accounts in Singapore, Hong Kong, the Caymans. Shipping routes, safe houses, front companies. Everything you need to dismantle the entire operation. Why? My voice had come out as a whisper. Because I'm tired, Hannah. Tired of being Kenji Sato, Wakagashira of the Yamaguchi-gumi. Tired of hurting people because it's the only thing I know how to do. Tired of waking up every morning and hating the face I see in the mirror. He'd pushed the USB drive toward me. And because somewhere in the last 81 days, you made me believe that maybe I could be someone different. Someone worth knowing instead of fearing. This could be a trap. It could be. But you're going to take the chance anyway because 12, 14-year-old girls are worth the risk. That's who you are. It's why He'd stopped, swallowed hard. Just take the drive. Make the call. Get those girls out safely. What about you? I'll disappear. I've been moving money around for months, setting up contingencies. By the time your people raid that warehouse, I'll be gone. Your agency can have the trafficking network. They just can't have me. That's not how this works. If I bring you in, they can offer you protection. Witness security, relocation, a new identity. For me and my family? My mother, my sister, my 7-year-old niece who collects pandas. He'd laughed, bitter and tired. Your government can't protect them. Not from the Yamaguchi-gumi. The moment they find out I cooperated with federal agents, everyone I love becomes a target. So no deal. I give you the trafficking network, you give me a head start. That's the arrangement. I'd looked at the USB drive, at everything I'd come here to find, being offered freely by the man I'd been sent to investigate. The man I'd somehow, impossibly, started to care about. 24 hours, I'd said. I give you 24 hours to disappear before I send in the cavalry. That's all I need. He'd stood, adjusted his suit jacket. Thank you, Hannah. For everything. For seeing me as a person instead of just a monster. For what it's worth, I'd said, I don't think you're a monster. Then you haven't been paying attention. He'd walked to the door, paused. The wire in your obi, I've known about it since day one. I fed you exactly what I wanted the FBI to hear. My breath had caught. Why tell me now? Because you asked for honesty. He'd looked back at me, and his smile had been sad and genuine and beautiful. Everything I told you about books and cherry blossoms and the person I wish I could be, that was real. All of it was real. Then he'd been gone, and I'd been alone with a USB drive that could save 12 girls and destroy a criminal empire, but couldn't save the man who'd given it to me. I'd made the call. Given Morrison the intel. The raid had gone down on day 82. Warehouse 7, Yokohama Port. 12 girls recovered alive. Minimal casualties. 53 arrests in the initial sweep, with hundreds more in the following weeks as they traced the network across 3 countries. It had been a massive success. Career-making work. Morrison had been ecstatic. And Kenji had disappeared like smoke. Morrison had extracted me on day 89, one day early. I'd packed my belongings from the tiny apartment, said goodbye to the other servers at Sakura House who'd never known my real name, and flown back to Virginia. I'd sat in debriefing sessions for 2 weeks. Told the story over and over, how I'd maintained cover, how I'd gained Kenji's trust, how I'd convinced him to cooperate. I'd left out certain details. The way he'd said my name. The warmth of his hand on mine. The fact that I'd reviewed those recorded conversations a dozen times, listening to his voice like a prayer or an addiction. Outstanding work, Agent Chin, Morrison had said at the end. We've dismantled one of the largest trafficking operations in East Asia. Saved hundreds of potential victims. And you maintained perfect operational security throughout. This is exactly the kind of work that makes careers. Did you find him? I'd asked. Kenji Sato? No. And between you and me, I'm not trying very hard. We got what we needed. He gave us the network, he disappeared, and everyone wins. Besides, a man with his resources and connections? If he wants to stay gone, he stays gone. So that's it? We just let him walk. He's not the enemy, Emily. He never was. The enemy is the system that creates men like him. The poverty and desperation and violence that makes trafficking profitable. Kenji Sato was just one cog in a very large machine. And now that machine is broken. Morrison had closed my file. Take some time. Decompress. See the bureau psychologist. Then we'll talk about your next assignment. But I hadn't been ready for a next assignment. I'd requested leave. Personal time. Morrison had granted it, though I'd seen the concern in his eyes. He'd known. Somehow he'd known that I'd left part of myself in that tea room in Shibuya. Now, 3 months later, I'm standing in Ueno Park at sunset, and Kenji Sato is feeding pigeons like he's just an ordinary man living an ordinary life. I'd spent weeks looking for him. Used every resource I had, called in favors, followed leads that went nowhere. I'd been to every tea house, every restaurant, every place he'd mentioned during our 81 days of conversations. Nothing. Then yesterday, completely by accident, I'd seen him. Just walking down the street in Ueno, carrying groceries. Ordinary. Anonymous. Free. I'd followed him here. To this park bench, where he's sitting in jeans and a plain shirt, tossing grain to birds like he has all the time in the world. He sees me approaching. Freezes for just a second. Then his expression smooths into something neutral. Waiting. I sit down beside him. Neither of us speaks for a long moment. You're not supposed to be here, he says finally in English. Perfect, unaccented English that tells me he's had yet another life I knew nothing about. Neither are you. I moved the money around. Created a new identity. Plastic surgery on my face, just enough to change the bone structure. New fingerprints courtesy of a very expensive surgeon in Thailand. He tosses more grain. Kenji Sato is dead. Died in a car accident in Osaka 2 months ago. Very tragic. There was a funeral and everything. So who are you now? No one important. A translator. I work freelance, mostly technical manuals and business documents. I live in a small apartment in Kichijoji. I take the train to work. I feed pigeons in parks. He glances at me. It's boring. Peaceful. Everything I never thought I'd have. Do you miss it? Your old life. Every day. Not the violence or the fear or the constant weight of blood on my hands. But the purpose maybe. The sense of mattering even if it was for terrible reasons. He's quiet for a moment. Mostly I miss knowing who I was. Evil is clarifying. You always know exactly where you stand. This, being no one mattering to no one, it's harder than I expected. Subscribe if you believe that sometimes the hardest part of redemption isn't escaping your past, but learning to live without the identity it gave you. I watch the pigeons scatter and return, scatter and return. The 12 girls. They're all safe. Back with their families or in protective custody. The trafficking network is destroyed. Hundreds of arrests. Routes shut down from Manila to Macau. Good. Kenji, I stop. What do I even call you? Takashi. My new name is Takashi Yamada. Boring. Forgettable. Perfect. Takashi then. The intel you gave us, it saved lives. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands if you count all the girls who won't be trafficked now that the network's broken. I know. I keep track. I read the news obsessively, looking for stories about trafficking arrests, rescued victims. I count them like other people count blessings. He turns to look at me fully. But I also know that doesn't erase what I did before. The girls I didn't save. The operations I ran, the money I made, the lives I destroyed. Good deeds don't cancel out sins, Emily. My breath catches at the sound of my real name. How long have you known? Since day 3. You have a small scar behind your right ear. Looks like a childhood injury. I ran your photo through facial recognition software, found Emily Chin, FBI special agent, graduated top of your class from Quantico, specialized in Asian organized crime. Your mother's name was Lin Chin, trafficked from Taiwan, died when you were 12. Your whole life has been about finishing her war. He smiles, sad and knowing. We were both undercover, Emily. Both playing roles. Both lying about who we were while telling the truth in every way that mattered. You let me continue. Knowing I was FBI. Because I wanted what you were offering. A way out. An end to being Kenji Sato. He stands, brushes grain off his pants. And because by day 40 I was already half in love with you, and I needed to believe you might be real. The world tilts sideways. I was using you. I know. And I was using you. We used each other to become the people we wanted to be instead of the ones we were forced to be. He looks down at me. The question is, now that we're both free, now that we're both supposedly ourselves again, is there anything left? Or was it all just the mission? I stand too. Pull out a business card, not FBI, just my name and personal number. There's a tea house in Kichijoji. Small place. They serve decent sencha. If you happen to be there tomorrow evening around 8. He takes the card. Studies it like it's a test with no right answer. Why? Because 99 days was real, Kenji, Takashi. Whatever your name is. The conversations, the connection, the way you saw me even when I was trying to be invisible. I meet his eyes. I spent 3 months lying about who I was. Maybe it's time we both try telling the truth. The truth is complicated. So are we. He pockets the card. Tomorrow at 8. No wire this time. No wire. No mission. Just tea. Just tea, he echoes. Then, for what it's worth, the wire didn't bother me. I knew what I was signing up for. But Emily? The scar on your ribs, the one you tried to hide when changing your kimono, that wasn't part of any file I could find. Cigarette burns, I think. 10 of them. My hand moves instinctively to cover them, even though we're both fully clothed. My mother's boyfriend. Before she got away from that life. He used her as an ashtray when he was angry. I'm sorry. Don't be. It made me who I am. I turn to leave, then stop. The blood on your knuckles that night, day 73. What was that really about? I beat a man half to death for hitting one of the servers at another tea house. She was 16. He was 60. He thought he'd bought the right to do whatever he wanted. Kenji, Takashi shrugs. I broke both his arms and 3 ribs. Told him if he ever touched another girl, I'd finish the job. My boss was furious. Said I was getting soft. Maybe I was. Maybe you'd already started changing me and I didn't even realize it. Then he walks away, disappearing into the crowd of ordinary people living ordinary lives. But just before he's out of sight, he looks back. Catches my eye. Nods once. Tomorrow at 8. I stand there until the sun sets completely, the card I gave him burning a hole in my imagination. Tomorrow evening. A tea house in Kichijoji. No wire. No mission. Just 2 people who spent 99 days lying to each other, trying to figure out if truth is even possible after that much deception. I pull out my phone. Text Morrison, taking extended leave. Personal reasons. His response is immediate. Chin. Don't do this. I type back. Some missions don't end when the case closes. Some of them become something else entirely. Then I silence my phone and walk toward my hotel, toward tomorrow evening, toward whatever happens when 2 people built on lies try to construct something real. The truth is, I don't know if Takashi Yamada is really Kenji Sato trying to be good, or if he's just Kenji Sato trying to hide. I don't know if the man who gave me that USB drive was motivated by redemption or revenge or just exhaustion. I don't know if loving someone you met while you were both lying to each other can ever become real love. But I know that tomorrow at 8, I'll be sitting in a tea house in Kichijoji. I'll order sencha water at exactly 70 degrees, no sugar. I'll wait to see if he shows up. If the man who knew about my wire from day 1 but let me keep wearing it anyway still wants to know who I am when I'm not pretending to be Hannah. And maybe, just maybe, I'll learn something true about Takashi Yamada. About whether redemption is real or just another lie we tell ourselves to get through the night. The needle under my fingernail was day 99. This, tomorrow at 8, this is day 100. The day the mission ended and something else began. Something without surveillance or cover stories or exit strategies. Just 2 people. A pot of tea. And the terrifying possibility that the most honest thing either of us ever did was fall for each other while lying about everything else. I'll let you know how it goes. If I survive it,